close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath. Let yourself sink into the quiet, into the vastness. Tonight, we drift through a cosmos of shadows and light, a universe of quiet stars, of infinite darkness, where every flicker of light holds a story and every shadow whispers a secret. Imagine a sky that stretches endlessly, a velvet expanse dotted with countless stars, some close, some impossibly far. Yet each one pulses with a faint, uncanny rhythm, a rhythm older than time itself. Breathe slowly. Feel yourself floating among them, weightless, as if carried gently on the invisible currents of space. The quiet hum of the universe surrounds you, a sound not heard but felt, like the soft beating of an immense, unseen heart. Far away in the darkness, you sense things too vast to name. Galaxies spinning silently, stars collapsing into themselves, and in the void between whispers echo, memories of worlds that never were, and of worlds yet to come. You notice a faint, shimmering light. It grows and fades as if breathing. A distant comet arcs through the void, its trail a silver ribbon tracing the path of unknown destinies. Take another deep, slow breath. Feel the stillness, the quiet magnitude. Even in the endless night, there is beauty, a strange, haunting elegance, like Poe's own verses echoing through the cosmos, of loss, of wonder, of infinite mystery. And somewhere, beyond what you can see, a lone star flickers. Perhaps it is a message. Perhaps it is a dream. Or perhaps it is simply the universe, watching silently as you drift gently into sleep.
Close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath, and let your mind drift gently into the quiet. Tonight, we explore the mind of Edgar Allan Poe, a man fascinated by darkness, by mystery, and by the infinite cosmos beyond our world. Long before modern science revealed the immensity of space, Poe imagined a universe vast, silent, filled with stars, voids, and hidden forces. He saw the heavens as both beautiful and terrifying, a place where humans are small, and yet capable of wonder. One of his most remarkable works is Eureka, a prose poem. In it, Poe describes the birth of the universe, from a single particle expanding outward, an idea centuries before scientists spoke of the Big Bang. He thought about the immense distances between stars, the vast emptiness of space, and humanity's fragile place within it. In his stories, Poe often explores what happens when humans confront forces beyond their understanding. In A Descent into the Maelstrom, a man faces a swirling whirlpool, a powerful, uncontrollable force. Much like the universe itself, vast, indifferent, and awe-inspiring. Even in tales like The Fall of the House of Usher or The Mask of the Red Death, there is a sense of cosmic presence, a reminder that life is fragile, that forces greater than ourselves shape the world, and that beauty and terror are intertwined. Poe believed that by contemplating the stars, the infinite night sky, humans could glimpse the sublime, a feeling of awe, mystery, and wonder. The cosmos, in his vision, mirrors the human mind. Dark, deep, and full of secrets. Take another slow, gentle breath. Imagine the stars Poe described, the distant galaxies, the vast, quiet voids, and know that even as we are small, our imagination, our curiosity, allows us to touch the eternal. Let the calm of this thought settle, the quiet vastness of the universe, the beauty of mystery, and the soft wonder of Edgar Allan Poe's cosmic vision, wrap gently around your mind. And now let yourself drift slowly, softly, into the quiet night, into calm, into sleep. Beyond the stars, Poe imagined worlds unseen, places where light and darkness mingle, where time stretches endlessly, and silence itself seems alive. He often wrote about the mind, its fears, its longings, its fragile beauty. Poe believed that when we look at the heavens, we see reflections of our own thoughts, questions too vast to answer, and mysteries too deep to fully know. In some of his writings, he hints at the connection between life and death, earth and cosmos. How every human heartbeat echoes in the vastness, and every fleeting emotion is part of the larger rhythm of existence. Imagine drifting past distant suns, galaxies spinning silently, nebula glowing like ghostly flowers in the void, each one a monument to the beauty and terror of the universe. And in that quiet, you can feel the same awe that Poe felt. The sense that life is small, but your awareness, your imagination, is immense. He saw the universe as a mirror of human curiosity, a reminder that even in the darkest night, even amid uncertainty and fear, there is a place for wonder, for thought, for quiet reflection. Take a slow breath, and picture the infinite sky above you, the stars, the shadows between them. The space is too vast to measure, and know that Poe's vision allows us to see the cosmos not only as vast, but as deeply poetic. A universe filled with stories and mysteries waiting to be felt. Let the stillness of space and the gentle reflection of Poe's words surround your mind. Let it settle softly, like starlight on a quiet night. And now, drift slowly into the calm, into the night, into sleep. Beyond the beginning and the eventual return, Poe imagined the universe as a place of delicate balance. Every star, every planet, every particle moving in harmony. A rhythm dictated by unseen laws and a subtle divine purpose. He reflected on the smallness of human life within this vast expanse. How our joys, our fears, even our thoughts are but tiny ripples in a grand cosmic ocean. Yet, he also suggested that our awareness, our imagination, allows us to touch the infinite. Poe described matter and spirit as intertwined. Energy, light, and even consciousness flowing through the universe, linking all things, from the smallest atom to the largest celestial body. Everything connected, like threads in a tapestry too vast for the eye to follow. He often spoke of collapse, not as an end, but as transformation. A return to unity, where all distinctions fade, and the cosmos exists as one again. A cycle of creation, expansion, and reunion. Take a slow breath. Picture the stars, distant and brilliant. Feel the quiet weight of the void, and the gentle pull of unity. Everything eventually coming together. Silent, inevitable, beautiful. Poe saw the cosmos not as chaotic, but as purposeful, even if its purposes are beyond human comprehension. A universe alive with meaning, hidden in the patterns of motion, in the light of every star, and in the spaces between. As you drift, allow this vision to settle. The infinite cycle, the balance, the unity. Let your mind float among the galaxies, aware of their enormity, yet soothed by their silent order. Drift slowly now, above the vast expanse of stars. Feel the quiet hum of the universe, its silent rhythm stretching endlessly in every direction. Poe imagined not just matter, but thought and feeling woven into the cosmos. That every action, every motion, every light carries meaning beyond our grasp. He believed that even the smallest human act, a word, a glance, a dream, echoes across the vastness, touching worlds we cannot see. Far above, nebula glow like delicate ghostly flowers, their colors soft, swirling slowly. They remind us that creation is ongoing, that new stars are born, even as old ones fade. A constant cycle, quiet, eternal. Take a deep, gentle breath. Imagine a comet tracing a silver path across the dark sky, its tail flowing like a ribbon of thought, each movement a message, a reminder of beauty and mystery, and of the infinite patterns Poe loved to imagine. In his vision, darkness is not empty. It is alive with possibility. Silent, but full of hidden connections. Poe wrote that the mind can reach into it, through imagination, through reflection, touching the edges of the unknown, and finding wonder there. Imagine drifting past distant galaxies, each one turning slowly, stars orbiting in silence, planets following paths unseen, all moving according to a subtle, divine design, a pattern that is both vast and intimate, a reflection of the unity Poe envisioned. Even in this immensity, he reminded us of our fragility, how human life is brief, how our moments are fleeting. Yet our awareness, our capacity to imagine, connects us to the infinite and gives our lives resonance within the endless night. Take another slow, soft breath. Let the calm of the cosmos settle around you, the quiet movement of stars, the gentle turning of galaxies, the unseen threads that bind the universe together. And now drift gently, past nebulae and starlight, past shadows and hidden patterns, into the silence of space, into the calm, into sleep. In Eureka, Poe imagined the universe as alive with purpose. Every star, every planet, every particle, moving according to a hidden, divine order. He envisioned creation as a single, continuous thought, a beginning that unfolds outward, yet always aware of its eventual return. A cycle, eternal, serene, inevitable. Imagine the cosmos stretching endlessly, galaxies spinning slowly, nebulae glowing softly, planets tracing silent paths, all part of a vast interconnected design. Poe believed that the universe itself carries a kind of memory, a record of everything that has ever been, and a quiet anticipation of all that is to come. The motion of stars, the pull of gravity, the dance of light, all reflections of the unity he described. Take a slow breath. Picture the expansion, the gentle outward flow of energy and matter, a quiet force, yet unstoppable, guided by something greater than understanding. A divine will, subtle and serene. And yet, every force has a purpose. Even collapse, the eventual return to unity, is not an ending, but a transformation, a reunion of all things, back into the singular point from which everything began. Imagine floating through this cosmic rhythm, feeling the silent pulse of the universe, its ebb and flow, expansion and return, a harmony that is both vast and deeply personal. Poe's vision reminds us that even in the immensity of space, even in the endless dark, there is unity, order, and beauty. Take another slow, gentle breath. Feel the calm of this vision. The stars, the galaxies, the invisible threads, all moving together in quiet balance. And let it carry you softly into sleep. Now imagine that this vast expanding universe, the stars, the galaxies, the infinite threads Poe described, might not just be natural, but designed. Some thinkers suggest, what if all we see, all we experience, is part of a grand simulation? A carefully constructed reality, where every particle, every star, every cosmic motion follows rules we barely understand. Think of Poe's primordial particle, the origin of everything. Perhaps it is more than a beginning. Perhaps it is a seed of a program. A single code, from which everything flows, expands, evolves, and eventually returns to unity. Take a deep, slow breath. Consider the stars above, each one behaving with perfect precision. The galaxies spinning in silent harmony. The universe moving like clockwork. Could it be that the cosmos itself is aware of its design? Or that it follows rules set by some intelligence beyond us? In this vision, time, space, and even consciousness could be part of a structure. A simulation where everything, every thought, every feeling, every flicker of light, is connected to the whole. Yet, just as in Poe's imagination, even if the universe is a simulation, even if its laws are coded, the awe we feel, the wonder we experience, is real. It is ours to feel. Imagine drifting through this cosmic design, floating past stars through nebulae, each movement precise, yet beautiful, and realize whether the universe is natural or simulated. Its vastness, its mystery, its rhythm, still carries a quiet, gentle magic. Take another deep breath. Let the possibility of a designed cosmos merge with the calm of space, the quiet dance of creation, and let your mind drift softly into sleep. Poe drifts further into the silent darkness between galaxies. Here, the stars are few, but each one shines with a quiet intensity. He moves slowly, noticing the delicate balance, the gentle pull of gravity, the subtle dance of light and shadow. Far ahead, a swirling nebula appears. Its colors shift like smoke in a lantern. Reds, purples, and silver flicker softly. Poe floats closer, mesmerized by its endless patterns. He feels as if he could trace each swirl and follow it to the very edge of time itself. As he passes a black hole, its presence is silent, yet undeniable. A vast emptiness, bending light, bending thought. He contemplates how even the strongest forces in the universe carry a strange beauty, a kind of terrible grace, and he feels both fear and awe at the same time. In the distance, a faint glimmer catches his eye. Perhaps a distant civilization, or a star's last dying light. He imagines the countless stories that exist there. The dreams, the joys, the fears of beings we may never know, and yet somehow all connected by the quiet rhythm of the cosmos. Poe moves on, past constellations that resemble long-forgotten symbols, patterns that feel familiar yet impossible to name. He senses that the universe itself is speaking, not in words, but in the language of stars, of motion, of light. And he listens, carefully, patiently. Take a slow, deep breath. Imagine floating alongside him, weightless, silent, drifting through the endless cosmic ocean, feeling the calm, the vastness, and the quiet mysteries that stretch forever. He continues, past supernovae that blaze once and vanish, past planets untouched by life, and he smiles, softly, knowing that even in the immensity of space, even in the silence, there is wonder, there is beauty, and there is peace. Take one last gentle breath. Let the stars, the galaxies, the infinite universe cradle your mind and drift slowly, softly, into sleep. Poe drifts further into the silent darkness between galaxies. Here, the stars are few, but each one shines with a quiet intensity. He moves slowly, noticing the delicate balance, the gentle pull of gravity, the subtle dance of light and shadow. Far ahead, a swirling nebula appears. Its colors shift like smoke in a lantern. Reds, purples, and silver flicker softly. Poe floats closer, mesmerized by its endless patterns. He feels as if he could trace each swirl and follow it to the very edge of time itself. As he passes a black hole, its presence is silent, yet undeniable. A vast emptiness, bending light, bending thought. He contemplates how even the strongest forces in the universe carry a strange beauty, a kind of terrible grace, and he feels both fear and awe at the same time. In the distance, a faint glimmer catches his eye. Perhaps a distant civilization, or a star's last dying light. He imagines the countless stories that exist there. The dreams, the joys, the fears of beings we may never know, and yet somehow all connected by the quiet rhythm of the cosmos. Poe moves on, past constellations that resemble long-forgotten symbols, patterns that feel familiar yet impossible to name. He senses that the universe itself is speaking, not in words, but in the language of stars, of motion, of light. And he listens, carefully, patiently. Take a slow, deep breath. Imagine floating alongside him, weightless, silent, drifting through the endless cosmic ocean, feeling the calm, the vastness, and the quiet mysteries that stretch forever. He continues, past supernovae that blaze once and vanish, past planets untouched by life, and he smiles, softly, knowing that even in the immensity of space, even in the silence, there is wonder, there is beauty, and there is peace. Take one last gentle breath. Let the stars, the galaxies, the infinite universe cradle your mind and drift, slowly, softly, into sleep. We had now reached the summit of the loftiest crag. For some moments, the old man seemed too weary to speak. His body heavy, his breath slow, his thoughts quiet. At last he whispered softly, "Not long ago, I could have guided you along this path, as easily as the youngest of my sons. But 3 years passed. Something happened to me. Something unlike anything a mortal has ever faced, or at least survived to tell." He paused, and I felt the weight of his words. The 6 hours of terror I endured have broken me, body and soul. I am not as old as I appear, yet in a single day, my hair turned from jet black to white, my limbs weakened, and my nerves unstrung, so that I tremble at the slightest effort, and even a shadow frightens me. Do you know, I can scarcely look over this little cliff without feeling dizzy, without feeling the ground sway beneath me. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the calm, the quiet wind at the summit, the stillness of the rocks, and let your mind rest, softly, gently, like the old man at the peak, listening to the world, and letting the night carry you into sleep. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your body sink into your chair. And imagine a quiet evening, the faint glow of lamplight around you. I had fallen into a great rage, though I could not say why. "This thing," I whispered to myself, "is a falsehood, a poor hoax. The invention of some wretched writer, imagining impossible accidents." And yet, I paused, the very increase of such oddities is the oddest thing of all. As I sat there, pondering, a strange voice broke the silence. Mein Gott, denn, wette will you bees for dat? At first, I thought it was a rumble in my ears, a sound like the echo of a barrel being struck. But then I realized the words were real, and they were speaking to me. I looked slowly around the room. Nothing at first. And then, just before my eyes, there sat a figure at the table. A curious, strange being, its shape unlike any I had ever seen. Its body seemed made of barrels. Its arms were long bottles hanging loosely, and on top of it, a canteen for a head. Through a small hole, it muttered words, grumbling and rumbling. Yet somehow I understood it. You see, it said, it I zet the best for zit still. I am the angel of the odd. I blinked and tried to understand. An angel, yet nothing like the angels I had imagined. No wings, only a gentle, mischievous presence. A calm, strange force of the night. You are no chicken, I whispered, somewhat relieved. The angel seemed pleased. Sit still and behave yourself, it said gently, or I'll tap you again. It reached across the table lightly and tapped me on the forehead, not harshly but with purpose. A reminder to remain calm, to let the oddities of the world pass, to let the night flow gently around me. A few moments later it softened. Mein Gott, the angel said kindly, you must not drink it so strong. Here, drink this and don't cry, don't worry. All shall be well, and all shall pass quietly. Take a slow, soft breath. Feel the calm of the room, the gentle, odd presence of the angel, and let it remind you that the world, with all its strangeness, can be met with peace, patience, and a quiet heart. Now let your eyes close. Let the warmth of the night and the gentle oddities of the world carry you softly into sleep. At last I began to understand the strange and terrifying situation in which I hung, and with what strength I had left, I tried to call out to the one above me, guiding the machine. But no answer came. The balloon drifted higher, slowly, steadily, and my strength began to fade, even faster. I felt myself growing weaker, as if I might simply let go and fall quietly into the distant sea below. And just then, a sound reached me, a hollow voice drifting lazily through the air, softly humming as if nothing were wrong at all. I looked up slowly, and there, leaning over the edge, calm, relaxed, and entirely at ease, was the angel of the odd. He held a pipe between his lips, puffing gently, as though the universe itself were perfectly in order. I had no strength to speak, so I simply looked at him, silently asking for help. For a long moment, he said nothing, only watched me. Then at last he spoke. Who pmu und wat you nu der? I could barely answer, only whispering a single word. Help. But the angel only echoed it slowly. Help, not I. And then, quite calmly, he dropped something. A heavy bottle, which struck my head. For a moment, everything faded, as though my thoughts themselves had shattered, and I nearly let go, ready to drift away into nothingness. But then, his voice returned. Hold on, he said, gently now. Don't be in a hurry. I nodded weakly, trying to show him I understood. He watched me closely, and asked, in his slow, curious way, do you believe now in Tjord? I nodded. And in me? Again, I nodded. The strange angel seemed satisfied. For a moment, all was calm. And then suddenly, his voice changed. Go to the Teufel den. In one swift motion, he cut the rope, and I fell. Not fast, not violently, but as if drifting through a dream, down, through darkness, through silence, until gently, I found myself once more by the quiet hearth, the fire gone cold, ashes soft beneath me, fragments of glass scattered, the faint scent of wine lingering in the air. All was still. All was calm again. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, it felt as though the angel of the odd had simply smiled. Take a slow, gentle breath. Let the strangeness fade into calm. Let the night settle around you, and drift softly into sleep. It is with humility really unassumed. It is with a sentiment even of awe that I pen the opening sentence of this work. For of all conceivable subjects I approach the reader with the most solemn, the most comprehensive, the most difficult, the most august. What terms shall I find sufficiently simple in their sublimity, sufficiently sublime in their simplicity, for the mere enunciation of my theme? I design to speak of the physical, metaphysical and mathematical, of the material and spiritual universe, of its essence, its origin, its creation, its present condition, and its destiny. I shall be so rash, moreover, as to challenge the conclusions, and thus, in effect, to question the sagacity of many of the greatest and most justly reverenced of men. In the beginning, let me as distinctly as possible announce, not the theorem which I hope to demonstrate, for whatever the mathematicians may assert, there is, in this world at least, no such thing as demonstration, but the ruling idea which, throughout this volume, I shall be continually endeavoring to suggest. My general proposition, then, is this: in the original unity of the first thing lies the secondary cause of all things, with the germ of their inevitable annihilation. In illustration of this idea, I propose to take such a survey of the universe that the mind may be able really to receive and to perceive an individual impression. He who from the top of Etna casts his eyes leisurely around is affected chiefly by the extent and diversity of the scene. Only by a rapid whirling on his heel could he hope to comprehend the panorama in the sublimity of its oneness. But as, on the summit of Etna, no man has thought of whirling on his heel, so no man has ever taken into his brain the full uniqueness of the prospect. And so again, whatever considerations lie involved in this uniqueness have as yet no practical existence for mankind. I do not know a treatise in which a survey of the universe, using the word in its most comprehensive and only legitimate acceptation, is taken at all, and it may be as well here to mention that by the term universe, wherever employed without qualification in this essay, I mean to designate the utmost conceivable expanse of space, with all things, spiritual and material, that can be imagined to exist within the compass of that expanse. In speaking of what is ordinarily implied by the expression universe, I shall take a phrase of limitation, the universe of stars. Why this distinction is considered necessary will be seen in the sequel. But even of treatises on the really limited, although always assumed as the unlimited universe of stars, I know none in which a survey even of this limited universe is so taken as to warrant deductions from its individuality. The nearest approach to such a work is made in the Cosmos of Alexander von Humboldt. He presents the subject, however, not in its individuality, but in its generality. His theme, in its last result, is the law of each portion of the merely physical universe, as this law is related to the laws of every other portion of this merely physical universe. His design is simply sino-heretical. In a word, he discusses the universality of material relation, and discloses to the eye of philosophy whatever inferences have hitherto lain hidden behind this universality. But however admirable be the succinctness with which he has treated each particular point of his topic, the mere multiplicity of these points occasions, necessarily, an amount of detail and thus an involution of idea, which precludes all individuality of impression. It seems to me that, in aiming at this latter effect, and through it, at the consequences, the conclusions, the suggestions, the speculations, or if nothing better offer itself, the mere guesses which may result from it, we require something like a mental gyration on the heel. We need so rapid a revolution of all things about the central point of sight that, while the minutiae vanish altogether, even the more conspicuous objects become blended into one. Among the vanishing minutiae, in a survey of this kind, would be all exclusively terrestrial matters. The Earth would be considered in its planetary relations alone. A man, in this view, becomes mankind, mankind a member of the cosmical family of intelligences. And now, before proceeding to our subject proper, let me beg the reader's attention to an extract or two from a somewhat remarkable letter, which appears to have been found corked in a bottle and floating on the Mare Tenebrarum, an ocean well described by the Nubian geographer Ptolemy Hephaestion, but little frequented in modern days, unless by the transcendentalists and some other divers for crotchets. The date of this letter, I confess, surprises me even more particularly than its contents, for it seems to have been written in the year 2848. As for the passages I am about to transcribe, they, I fancy, will speak for themselves. "Do you know, my dear friend," says the writer, addressing, no doubt, a contemporary, "do you know that it is scarcely more than 800 or 900 years ago since the metaphysicians first consented to relieve the people of the singular fancy that there exist but two practicable roads to truth? Believe it if you can. It appears, however, that long ago, in the night of time, there lived a Turkish philosopher called Ares, and surnamed Total. Here, possibly, the letter writer means Aristotle. The best names are wretchedly corrupted in 2,000 or 3,000 years. The fame of this great man depended mainly upon his demonstration that sneezing is a natural provision, by means of leaven, which over-profound thinkers are enabled to expel superfluous ideas through the nose. But he obtained a scarcely less valuable celebrity as the founder, or at all events as the principal propagator, of what was termed the deductive or a priori philosophy. He started with what he maintained to be axioms or self-evident truths. And the now well understood fact that no truths are self-evident really does not make in the slightest degree against his speculations. It was sufficient for his purpose that the truths in question were evident at all. From axioms he proceeded, logically, to results. His most illustrious disciples were one Euclid, a geometrician, meaning Euclid, and one Kant, a Dutchman, the originator of that species of transcendentalism which, with the change merely of a C for a K, now bears his peculiar name. Well, Ares Total flourished supreme until the advent of one Hog, surnamed the Ettrick Shepherd, who preached an entirely different system, which he called the a posteriori, or inductive. His plan referred altogether to sensation. He proceeded by observing, analyzing, and classifying facts, instantiae naturae, as they were somewhat affectedly called, and arranging them into general laws. In a word, while the mode of Ares rested on noumena, that of Hog depended on phenomena, and so great was the admiration excited by this latter system that at its first introduction, Ares fell into general disrepute. Finally, however, he recovered ground and was permitted to divide the empire of philosophy with his more modern rival, the savans, contenting themselves with prescribing all other competitors, past, present, and to come, putting an end to all controversy. 12 on the topic by the promulgation of a median law to the effect that the Aristotelian and Baconian roads are, and of right ought to be, the solo possible avenues to knowledge. Baconian, you must know, my dear friend, adds the letter writer at this point, was an Now I do assure you most positively, proceeds the epistle, that I represent these matters fairly, and you can easily understand how restrictions so absurd on their very face must have operated in those days to retard the progress of true science, which makes its most important advances, as all history will show, by seemingly intuitive leaps. These ancient ideas confined investigation to crawling, and I need not suggest to you that crawling, among varieties of locomotion, is a very capital thing of its kind, but because the tortoise is sure of foot, for this reason must we clip the wings of the eagles. For many centuries, so great was the infatuation, about Hog especially, that a virtual stop was put to all thinking, properly so called. No man dared utter a truth for which he felt himself indebted to his soul alone. It mattered not whether the truth was even demonstrably such, for the dogmatizing philosophers of that epoch regarded only the road by which it professed to have been attained. The end, with them, was a point of no moment whatever. The means. They vociferated, let us look at the means. And if, on scrutiny of the means, it was found to come neither under the category Hog, nor under the category Ares, which means ram, why then the savans went no farther, but calling the thinker a fool, and 13 branding him a theorist, would never thenceforward have anything to do either with him or with his truths. Now, my dear friend, continues the letter writer, It cannot be maintained that by the crawling system exclusively adopted, men would arrive at the maximum amount of truth, even in any long series of ages. For the repression of imagination was an evil not to be counterbalanced, even by absolute certainty in the snail processes. But their certainty was very far from absolute. The error of our progenitors was quite analogous with that of the wiseacre, who fancies he must necessarily see an object the more distinctly, the more closely he holds it to his eyes. They blinded themselves too with the impalpable, titillating Scotch snuff of detail, and thus the boasted facts of the Hoggites were by no means always facts, a point of little importance but for the assumption that they always were. The vital taint, however, in Baconianism, its most lamentable fount of error, lay in its tendency to throw power and consideration into the hands of merely perceptive men, of those intertritonic minnows, the microscopical savants, the diggers and peddlers of minute facts for the most part in physical science, facts all of which they retailed at the same price upon the highway, their value depending, it was supposed, simply upon the fact of their fact, without reference to their applicability or inapplicability in the development of those than the persons, the letter goes on to say, than the persons thus suddenly elevated by the Hoggian philosophy into a station for which they were unfitted, thus transferred from the sculleries into the parlors of science, from 14 its pantries into its pulpits, than these individuals are more intolerant. A more intolerable set of bigots and tyrants never existed on the face of the earth. Their creed, their text and their sermon were alike the one word, fact. But for the most part, even of this one word, they knew not even the meaning. On those who ventured to disturb their facts with the view of putting them in order and to use, the disciples of Hogg had no mercy whatever. All attempts at generalization were met at once by the words theoretical, theory, theorist. All thought, to be brief, was very properly resented as a personal affront to themselves, cultivating the natural sciences to the exclusion of metaphysics, the mathematics and logic. Many of these Bacon-engendered philosophers, one-eyed, one-sided and lame of a leg, were more wretchedly helpless, more miserably ignorant, in view of all the comprehensible objects of knowledge, than the veriest unlettered hind who proves that he knows something at least, in admitting that he knows absolutely nothing. Nor had our forefathers any better right to talk about certainty, when pursuing in blind confidence the a priori path of axioms, or of the ram. At innumerable points, this path was scarcely as straight as a ram's horn. The simple truth is that the Aristotelians erected their castles upon a basis far less reliable than air. For no such things as axioms ever existed or can possibly exist at all. This they must have been very blind, indeed not to see or at least to suspect, for even in their own day, many of their long-admitted axioms had been abandoned. Ex nihilo nihil fit, for example, and a thing cannot act where it is not, and 15, there cannot be antipodes, and darkness cannot proceed from light. These and numerous similar propositions formerly accepted, without hesitation, as axioms or undeniable truths, were, even at the period of which I speak, seen to be altogether untenable. How absurd in these people, then, to persist in relying upon a basis as immutable, whose mutability had become so repeatedly manifest. But even through evidence afforded by themselves against themselves, it is easy to convict these a priori reasoners of the grossest unreason. It is easy to show the futility, the impalpability of their axioms in general. I have now lying before me, it will be observed that we still proceed with the letter. I have now lying before me a book printed about 1,000 years ago. Pundit assures me that it is decidedly the cleverest ancient work on its topic, which is logic. The author, who was much esteemed in his day, was one Miller or Mill, and we find it recorded of him as a point of some importance that he rode a mill horse whom he called Jeremy Bentham. But let us glance at the volume itself. Ability or inability to conceive, says Mr. Mill very properly, is in no case to be received as a criterion of axiomatic truth. Now, that this is a palpable truism no one in his senses will deny. Not to admit the proposition is to insinuate a charge of variability in truth itself, whose very title is a synonym of the steadfast. If ability to conceive be taken as a criterion of truth, then a truth to David Hume would very seldom be a truth to Joe, and 99/100ths of what is undeniable in heaven would be demonstrable falsity upon earth. The proposition 16 of Mr. Mill, then, is sustained. I will not grant it to be an axiom, and this merely because I am showing that no axioms exist, but, with a distinction which could not have been cavilled at even by Mr. Mill himself, I am ready to grant that if an axiom there be, then the proposition of which we speak has the fullest right to be considered an axiom, that no more absolute axiom is, and consequently, that any subsequent proposition which shall conflict with this one primarily advanced, must be either a falsity in itself, that is to say no axiom, or if admitted axiomatic, must at once neutralize. And now, by the logic of their own propounder, let us proceed to test any one of the axioms propounded. Let us give Mr. Mill the fairest of play. We will bring the point to no ordinary issue. We will select for investigation no commonplace axiom. No axiom of what, not the less preposterously because only impliedly, he terms his secondary class, as if a positive truth by definition could be either more or less positively a truth. We will select, I say, no axiom of an unquestionability, so questionable as is to be found in Euclid. We will not talk, for example, about such propositions as that two straight lines cannot enclose a space, or that the whole is greater than any one of its parts. We will afford the logician every advantage. We will come at once to a proposition which he regards as the acme of the unquestionable, as the quintessence of axiomatic undeniability. Here it is. Contradictions cannot both be true, that is, cannot coexist in nature. Here Mr. Mill means, for instance, and I give the most forcible instance conceivable, that a tree must be either a tree or not a tree. That 17 it cannot be at the same time a tree and not a tree. All which is quite reasonable of itself, and will answer remarkably well as an axiom, until we bring it into collation with an axiom insisted upon a few pages before. In other words which I have previously employed, until we test it by the logic of its own propounder. A tree, Mr. Mill asserts, must be either a tree or not a tree. Very well, and now let me ask him why. To this little query there is but one response. I defy any man living to invent a second. The sole answer is this: because we find it impossible to conceive that a tree can be anything else than a tree or not a tree. This, I repeat, is Mr. Mill's sole answer. He will not pretend to suggest another, and yet by his own showing, his answer is clearly no answer at all, for has he not already required us to admit, as an axiom, that ability or inability to conceive is in no case to be taken as a criterion of axiomatic truth? Thus absolutely all his argumentation is at sea without a rudder. Let it not be urged that an exception from the general rule is to be made, in cases where the impossibility to conceive is so peculiarly great as when we are called upon to conceive a tree, both a tree and not a tree. Let no attempt, I say, be made at urging this sotticism. For, in the first place, there are no degrees of impossibility, and thus no one impossible conception can be more peculiarly impossible than another impossible conception. In the second place, Mr. Mill himself, no doubt after thorough deliberation, has most distinctly and most rationally excluded all opportunity for exception by the emphasis of his proposition that in no case is ability or inability to conceive to be taken as that a tree can be both a tree and not a tree is an idea which the angels or the devils may entertain, and which no doubt many an earthly bedlamite or transcendentalist does. Now I do not quarrel with these ancients, continues the letter writer, so much on account of the transparent frivolity of their logic, which, to be plain, was baseless, worthless, and fantastic altogether, as on account of their pompous and infatuate prescription of all other roads to truth than the two narrow and crooked paths, the one of creeping and the other of crawling, to which in their ignorant perversity they have dared to confine the soul which loves nothing so well as to soar in those regions of illimitable intuition. By the by, my dear friend, is it not an evidence of the mental slavery entailed upon those bigoted people by their hogs and rams, that in spite of the eternal prating of their savans about roads to truth, none of them fell, even by accident, into what we now so distinctly perceive to be the broadest, the straightest and most available of all mere roads, the great thoroughfare, the majestic highway of the consistent? Is it not wonderful that they should have failed to deduce from the works of God the vitally momentous consideration that a perfect consistency can be nothing but an absolute truth? How plain, how rapid our progress since the late announcement of this proposition! By its means, investigation has been taken out of 19 the hands of the ground moles, and given as a duty rather than as a task, to the only true thinkers, to the generally educated men of ardent imagination. These latter, our Keplers, our Laplaces, speculate, theorize, these are the terms. Can you not fancy the shout of scorn with which they would be received by our progenitors, were it possible for them to be looking over my shoulders as I write? The Keplers, I repeat, speculate, theorize, and their theories are merely corrected, reduced, sifted, cleared, little by little, of their chaff of inconsistency, until at length there stands apparent an unencumbered consistency, a consistency which the most stolid admit, because it is a consistency, to be an absolute and an unquestionable truth. I have often thought, my friend, that it must have puzzled these dogmaticians of 1,000 years ago to determine even by which of their two boasted roads it is that the cryptographist attains the solution of the more complicate ciphers, or by which of them Champollion guided mankind to those important and innumerable truths which, for so many centuries, have lain entombed amid the phonetical hieroglyphics of Egypt. In especial, would it not have given these bigots some trouble to determine by which of their two roads was reached the most momentous and sublime of all their truths, the fact of gravitation? Newton deduced it from the laws of Kepler. Kepler admitted that these laws he guessed. These laws, whose investigation disclosed to the greatest of British astronomers that principle, the basis of all existing physical principle, in going behind which we enter at once the nebulous kingdom. Yes, these vital laws Kepler guessed, that is to say, he imagined them. Had he been asked to point out either the deductive or inductive route by which he attained them, his reply might have been, "I know nothing about routes, but I do know the machinery of the universe. Here it is. I grasped it with my soul. I reached it through mere dint of intuition. Alas, poor ignorant old man. Could not any metaphysician have told him that what he called intuition was but the conviction resulting from deductions or inductions, of which the processes were so shadowy as to have escaped his consciousness, eluded his reason, or bidden defiance to his capacity of expression? How great a pity it is that some moral philosopher had not enlightened him about all this. How it would have comforted him on his deathbed to know that, instead of having gone intuitively and thus unbecomingly, he had in fact proceeded decorously and legitimately, that is to say, hog-ishly, or at least ram-ishly, into the vast halls where lay gleaming, untended, and hitherto untouched by mortal hand, unseen by mortal eye, the imperishable and priceless secrets of the universe. Yes, Kepler was essentially a theorist, but this title, now of so much sanctity, was, in those ancient days, a designation of supreme contempt. It is only now that men begin to appreciate that divine old man, to sympathize with the prophetical and poetical rhapsody of his ever-memorable words. For my part, continues the unknown correspondent, I glow with a sacred fire when I even think of them, and feel that I shall never grow weary of their repetition. In concluding this letter, let me have the 21 real pleasure of transcribing them once again. I care not whether my work be read now or by posterity. I can afford to wait a century for readers, when God himself has waited 6,000 years for an observer. I triumph. I have stolen the golden secret of the Egyptians. I will indulge my sacred fury. Here end my quotations from this very unaccountable and perhaps somewhat impertinent epistle, and perhaps it would be folly to comment in any respect upon the chimerical, not to say revolutionary fancies of the writer, whoever he is, fancies so radically at war with the well-considered and well-settled opinions of this age. Let us proceed then to our legitimate thesis, the universe. This thesis admits a choice between two modes of discussion. We may ascend or descend. Beginning at our own point of view, at the Earth on which we stand, we may pass to the other planets of our system, thence to the Sun, thence to our system considered collectively, and thence, through other systems, indefinitely outwards, or, commencing on high at some point as definite as we can make it or conceive it, we may come down to the habitation of man. Usually, that is to say, in ordinary essays on astronomy, the first of these two modes is, with certain reservation, adopted. This for the obvious reason that astronomical facts, merely, and principles, being the object, that object is best fulfilled in stepping from the known because proximate, gradually onward, to the point where all certitude becomes lost in the remote. For my present purpose, however, that of enabling the mind to take in, as if from afar and at one glance, a distinct conception of the 22 individual universe, it is clear that a descent to small from great, to the outskirts from the center, if we could establish a center, to the end from the beginning if we could fancy a beginning, would be the preferable course, but for the difficulty, if not impossibility, of presenting in this course, to the unastronomical, a picture at all comprehensible in regard to such consideration. Now distinctness, intelligibility, at all points, is a primary feature in my general design. On important topics, it is better to be a good deal prolix than even a very little obscure. But abstruseness is a quality appertaining to no subject per se. All are alike in facility of comprehension, to him who approaches them by properly graduated steps. It is merely because a stepping stone, here and there, is heedlessly left unsupplied in our road to the differential calculus, that this latter is not altogether as simple a thing as a sonnet by Mr. Solomon Seesaw. By way of admitting, then, no chance for misapprehension, I think it advisable to proceed as if even the more obvious facts of astronomy were unknown to the reader. In combining the two modes of discussion to which I have referred, I propose to avail myself of the advantages peculiar to each, and very especially of the iteration in detail, which will be unavoidable as a consequence of the plan. Commencing with a descent, I shall reserve for the return upwards those indispensable considerations of quantity to which allusion has already been made. Let us begin then at once with that merest of words. 23. Infinity. This, like God, Spirit, and some other expressions of which the equivalents exist in all languages, is by no means the expression of an idea, but of an effort at one. It stands for the possible attempt at an impossible conception. Man needed a term by which to point out the direction of this effort, the cloud behind which lay, forever invisible, the object of this attempt. A word, in fine, was demanded, by means of which one human being might put himself in relation at once with another human being, and with a certain tendency of the human intellect. Out of this demand arose the word infinity, which is thus the representative, but of the thought of a thought. As regards that infinity now considered the infinity of space, we often hear it said that its idea is admitted by the mind, is acquiesced in, is entertained, on account of the greater difficulty which attends the conception of a limit. But this is merely one of those phrases by which even profound thinkers, time out of mind, have occasionally taken pleasure in deceiving themselves. The quibble lies concealed in the word difficulty. The mind, we are told, entertains the idea of limitless, through the greater difficulty which it finds in entertaining that of limited space. Now, were the proposition but fairly put, its absurdity would become transparent at once. Clearly, there is no mere difficulty in the case. The assertion intended, if presented according to its intention and without sophistry, would run thus. The mind admits the idea of limitless, through the greater impossibility of entertaining that of limited space. It must be immediately seen that this is not a question, 24, of two statements between whose respective credibilities, or of two arguments between whose respective validities, the reason is called upon to decide. It is a matter of two conceptions, directly conflicting, and each avowedly impossible, one of which the intellect is supposed to be capable of entertaining, on account of the greater impossibility of entertaining the other. The choice is not made between two difficulties, it is merely fancied to be made between two impossibilities. Now of the former, there are degrees, but of the latter, none, just as our impertinent letter writer has already suggested. A task may be more or less difficult, but it is either possible or not possible. There are no gradations. It might be more difficult to overthrow the Andes than an ant hill, but it can be no more impossible to annihilate the matter of the one than the matter of the other. A man may jump 10 feet with less difficulty than he can jump 20, but the impossibility of his leaping to the moon is not a whit less than that of his leaping to the dog star. Since all this is undeniable, since the choice of the mind is to be made between impossibilities of conception, since one impossibility cannot be greater than another, and since thus one cannot be preferred to another, The philosophers who not only maintain on the grounds mentioned man's idea of infinity, but on account of such supposititious idea infinity itself, are plainly engaged in demonstrating one impossible thing to be possible by showing how it is that some one other thing is impossible too. This, it will be said, is nonsense, and perhaps it is. Indeed, 25, I think it very capital nonsense, but forego all claim to it as nonsense of mine. The readiest mode, however, of displaying the fallacy of the philosophical argument on this question is by simply adverting to a fact respecting it which has been hitherto quite overlooked, the fact that the argument alluded to both proves and disproves its own proposition. The mind is impelled, say the theologians and others, to admit a first cause by the superior difficulty it experiences in conceiving cause beyond cause without end. The quibble, as before, lies in the word difficulty. But here, what is it employed to sustain? A first cause. And what is a first cause? An ultimate termination of causes. And what is an ultimate termination of causes? Finity, the finite. Thus the one quibble, in two processes, by God knows how many philosophers, is made to support now finity and now infinity. Could it not be brought to support something besides? As for the quibblers, they at least are insupportable, but to dismiss them, what they prove in the one case is the identical nothing which they demonstrate in the other. Of course, no one will suppose that I here contend for the absolute impossibility of that which we attempt to convey in the word infinity. My purpose is but to show the folly of endeavoring to prove infinity itself, or even our conception of it, by any such blundering ratiocination as that which is ordinarily employed. Nevertheless, as an individual, I may be permitted to say that I cannot conceive infinity, and am convinced that no human being can. A mind not thoroughly self-conscious, not 26 accustomed to the introspective analysis of its own operations, will, it is true, often deceive itself by supposing that it has entertained the conception of which we speak. In the effort to entertain it, we proceed step beyond step. We fancy point still beyond point, and so long as we continue the effort, it may be said, in fact, that we are tending to the formation of the idea designed, while the strength of the impression that we actually form or have formed it is in the ratio of the period during which we keep up the mental endeavor. But it is in the act of discontinuing the endeavor, of fulfilling, as we think, the idea, of putting the finishing stroke, as we suppose, to the conception, that we overthrow at once the whole fabric of our fancy by resting upon some one ultimate and therefore definite point. This fact, however, we fail to perceive, on account of the absolute coincidence in time between the settling down upon the ultimate point and the act of cessation in thinking. In attempting, on the other hand, to frame the idea of a limited space, we merely converse the processes which involve the impossibility. We believe in a God. We may or may not believe in finite or in infinite space, but our belief in such cases is more properly designated as faith, and is a matter quite distinct from that belief proper, from that intellectual belief, which presupposes the mental conception. The fact is, that upon the enunciation of any one of that class of terms to which infinity belongs, the class representing thoughts of thought, he who has a right to say that he thinks at all, feels himself called upon, not to entertain a conception, but simply to direct his mental vision, 27, towards some given point, in the intellectual firmament, where lies a nebula never to be resolved. To solve it, indeed, he makes no effort, for with a rapid instinct he comprehends, not only the impossibility, but as regards all human purposes, the inessentiality of its solution. He perceives that the deity has not designed it to be solved. He sees, at once, that it lies out of the brain of man, and even how, if not exactly why, it lies out of it. There are people, I am aware, who, busying themselves in attempts at the unattainable, acquire very easily, by dint of the jargon they emit, among those thinkers that they think with whom darkness and depth are synonymous, a kind of cuttlefish reputation for profundity. But the finest quality of thought is its self-cognizance, and, with some little equivocation, it may be said that no fog of the mind can well be greater than that which, extending to the very boundaries of the mental domain, shuts out even these boundaries themselves from comprehension. It will now be understood that, in using the phrase, infinity of space, I make no call upon the reader to entertain the impossible conception of an absolute infinity. I refer simply to the utmost conceivable expanse of space, a shadowy and fluctuating domain, now shrinking, now swelling, in accordance with the vacillating energies of the imagination. Hitherto, the universe of stars has always been considered as coincident with the universe proper, as I have defined it in the commencement of this discourse. It has been always either directly or indirectly assumed, at least since the dawn of intelligible astronomy, that were it 28 possible for us to attain any given point in space, we should still find on all sides of us an interminable succession of stars. This was the untenable idea of Pascal when making perhaps the most successful attempt ever made at paraphrasing the conception for which we struggle in the word universe. It is a sphere, he says, of which the center is everywhere, the circumference nowhere. But although this intended definition is, in fact, no definition of the universe of stars, we may accept it with some mental reservation, as a definition, rigorous enough for all practical purposes, of the universe proper, that is to say, of the universe of space. This latter, then, let us regard as a sphere, of which the center is everywhere, the circumference nowhere. In fact, while we find it impossible to fancy an end to space, we have no difficulty in picturing to ourselves any one of an infinity of beginnings. As our starting point, then, let us adopt the Godhead. Of this Godhead, in itself, he alone is not imbecile, he alone is not impious who propounds nothing. Nous ne connaissons rien, says the Baron de Bielefeld. Nous ne connaissons rien de la nature ou de l'essence de Dieu. Pour savoir ce qu'il est, il faut être Dieu même. We know absolutely nothing of the nature or essence of God. In order to comprehend what he is, we should have to be God ourselves. We should have to be God ourselves. With a phrase so startling as this yet ringing in my ears, I nevertheless venture to demand if this our present ignorance of the deity is an ignorance to which the soul is everlastingly condemned. By him, however, now at least the incomprehensible, by 29 him, assuming him as spirit, that is to say as not matter, a distinction which, for all intelligible purposes, will stand well instead of a definition. By him, then, existing as spirit, let us content ourselves tonight with supposing to have been created or made out of nothing by dint of his volition. At some point of space which we will take as a center, at some period into which we do not pretend to inquire, but at all events immensely remote, by him, this is a vitally momentous epoch in our considerations. What is it that we are justified? That alone we are justified in supposing to have been, primarily and solely, created. We have attained a point where only intuition can aid us. But now let me recur to the idea which I have already suggested, as that alone which we can properly entertain of intuition. It is but the conviction arising from those inductions or deductions, of which the processes are so shadowy as to escape our consciousness, elude our reason, or defy our capacity of expression. With this understanding, I now assert that an intuition altogether irresistible, although inexpressible, forces me to the conclusion that what God originally created, that matter which by dint of his volition he first made from his spirit, or from nihility, could have been nothing but matter in its utmost conceivable state of what? Of simplicity. This will be found the sole absolute assumption of my discourse. I use the word assumption in its ordinary sense. Yet I maintain that even this my primary proposition is very, very far indeed from being really a mere assumption. Nothing was ever more certainly, no human conclusion was ever in fact more regularly, more rigorously deduced. But, alas, the processes lie out of the human analysis. At all events are beyond the utterance of the human tongue. Let us now endeavor to conceive what matter must be, when or if, in its absolute extreme of simplicity. Here the reason flies at once to imparticularity, to a particle, to one particle, a particle of one kind, of one character, of one nature, of one size, of one form, a particle, therefore, without form and void, a particle positively a particle at all points, a particle absolutely unique, individual, undivided and not indivisible, only because he who created it by dint of his will, can by an infinitely less energetic exercise of the same will as a matter of course, divide it. Oneness, then, is all that I predicate of the originally created matter, but I propose to show that this oneness is a principle abundantly sufficient to account for the constitution, the existing phenomena, and the plainly inevitable annihilation of at least the material universe. The willing into being the primordial particle has completed the act, or more properly the conception, of creation. We now proceed to the ultimate purpose for which we are to suppose the particle created. That is to say, the ultimate purpose so far as our considerations yet enable us to see it, the constitution of the universe from it, the particle. This constitution has been effected by forcing the originally and therefore normally one into the abnormal condition of many. An action of this character implies reaction. A diffusion from unity under the conditions involves a tendency to return into unity, a tendency ineradicable until satisfied. But on these points I will speak more fully hereafter. The assumption of absolute unity in the primordial particle includes that of infinite divisibility. Let us conceive the particle, then, to be only not totally exhausted by diffusion into space. From the one particle as a center, let us suppose to be irradiated spherically in all directions, to immeasurable but still to definite distances in the previously vacant space, a certain inexpressibly great yet limited number of unimaginably yet not infinitely minute atoms.